The smell hit me before I even opened the door. Pine cleaner and something floral, the kind of air freshener my brother's wife always carried in her purse like a personal signature. I stood on my own front porch, keys still in my hand, and I already knew something was wrong. I'd been in Denver for 9 days. A work conference that turned into a site visit that turned into a weekend I actually needed. The first real break I'd taken in 2 years. My townhouse was supposed to be empty. I hadn't given anyone a key. I was very deliberate about that. I pushed the door open. The entryway rug was gone, not moved. Gone. In its place was a runner I'd never seen before, cream-colored with a pale blue pattern that looked like something out of a coastal grandmother's catalog. The hooks on the wall where I hung my coat and bag had been replaced with a row of decorative pegs that didn't match the trim. There were flowers on the console table. Fake ones. I didn't move from the doorway for a full minute. Then I walked through my own home like a stranger. The living room furniture had been rearranged. My dark gray sectional was pushed against the far wall at an angle I never would have chosen. The coffee table, a solid oak piece I'd saved for months to buy, had a new tray on it with candles and a little ceramic dish I'd never seen in my life. The gallery wall I'd spent an entire Saturday arranging was half dismantled. 3 of my frames were leaning against the baseboard. In their place were prints. Cheap ones, still in packaging store frames with the fake matting. I called my brother. He didn't pick up. I called my brother. He didn't pick up. I called his wife. She picked up on the second ring, and before I could say a single word, she said, "Oh, you're back early. I was going to have everything finished by Thursday." I asked her what exactly. She was going to have finished. "The refresh," she said. Cheerful, completely at ease. "I told your brother I was going to help you out while you were away. The place needed a little updating." I stood in the middle of my living room, looking at a candle I didn't buy sitting on a tray I didn't own, on a table I did, and I asked her how she got in. A pause. "Your brother had a spare key from when he watered your plants last spring. We just held on to it. I didn't remember giving my brother a key. I remembered asking him to water my plants once over a year ago, and I remembered being home when he came over. I didn't remember handing anything to anyone. I want you to come get your things," I said. "Today." Another pause. Longer this time. "I'm not finished," she said. I hung up. "Let me go back because none of this happened in a vacuum. My brother and I grew up in the same house, but we might as well have been raised in different families. He was the oldest. I was 6 years younger. By the time I was paying attention to how our household worked, he was already out of it. College, then a job in another city, then coming back with a woman he married quickly and a set of opinions about how everyone else should live their lives that he'd apparently developed somewhere along the way. His wife, I'll call her what she called herself to anyone who would listen, which was a person who just likes to help, had what I can only describe as a redecorating compulsion. She had done it to their own place twice in 3 years. She had done it to my parents' guest room without asking. She had shown up at my cousin's apartment after a breakup and, in the name of fresh energy, rearranged her bedroom furniture and donated 2 boxes of her things to Goodwill. My cousin was not asked. My cousin found out when she went looking for her grandmother's tablecloth. This is who she was. Everyone in our family treated it as a quirk, a generosity even. She meant well. She just wanted to help. She just got a little carried away sometimes. I was the only one who had consistently, clearly, and without apology said, "Not my space." She had mentioned at least 3 times in the past 2 years that my townhouse had potential. She had texted me a link to a throw pillow once with the caption, "This would look amazing in your living room." I hadn't responded. She had pointed at my gallery wall at Christmas dinner and said it looked a little cluttered. I told her I liked it that way. What she heard apparently was try again later. I drove to the nearest hardware store that evening and bought new locks. A deadbolt and a handle set, both keyed the same, both with 2 keys, one for me and one I would keep in my desk drawer. I watched a 15-minute video on my phone in the parking lot and I installed them myself when I got home. It took 40 minutes. It wasn't perfect. It was done. Then I sat on my own couch, pushed against the wrong wall, and I thought about what I was actually dealing with. She had let herself into my home. She had removed things. She had replaced things. She had planned to keep going until Thursday, which meant there were likely more changes coming, more of my choices being quietly overwritten with hers. And she had done it all with the complete confidence that I would be grateful. I was not grateful. I called my brother again. This time, he picked up. "Hey, yeah, I was going to call you back. She let herself into my house," I said. "She was trying to do something nice, with a key I didn't give her permission to use, to make changes I didn't ask for to a space that is mine." He was quiet for a moment. Then, with a tone I knew well, the tone of someone who had already decided what this conversation was going to be, before it started, he said, "You're making this into a bigger deal than it is." I asked him for the key back. He told me she probably still had it on her. "Then she can leave it in my mailbox," I said, "but it doesn't matter anymore because I changed the locks." The silence on his end had a particular texture, the kind that means someone is recalibrating. "That seems extreme," he said. "She entered my home without my permission. She was helping you. I didn't ask to be helped." We went around like that for a few more minutes. He didn't raise his voice. Neither did I. But by the end of the call, it was clear that in his version of this story, I was the problem. I was the one being cold, being rigid, being, and this is the word he used, ungrateful. I said goodnight and I ended the call. She texted me the next morning. A long message, the kind that's been drafted and redrafted, that opens with, "I just want to say," and ends with, "I really hope you can see where I'm coming from." The middle part was a list, essentially, of everything she had done and how much it had cost in time and effort and good intentions. She mentioned that she had spent 3 afternoons on this. She mentioned that she had bought things with her own money, a phrase she underlined by repeating it, and that she had planned to show me the receipts so I could reimburse her. I read that sentence twice. She had entered my home without permission, removed and replaced my belongings, and was now asking me to pay her for it. I put my phone face down on the kitchen counter and made coffee. I stood at the window for a while. The street outside was quiet, the ordinary kind of Tuesday morning quiet, and I remember thinking that I needed to be very deliberate about what I did next, because I was angry, genuinely, cleanly angry. But I also knew that anger by itself wasn't useful here. What I needed was to be precise. I picked up my phone. I didn't text her back. I called my insurance company instead to ask a general question about documentation for property disputes. Then I called a locksmith friend to ask about the legal weight of unauthorized entry in a private residence, just conversationally. And then I did something I had actually done 8 months ago for entirely unrelated reasons. I pulled up the app for the small camera I had installed above my front door, the one that looked like a standard security light and that I had never mentioned to anyone because it had simply never come up. I scrolled back through the footage. Day 1. She arrived at 9:14 in the morning with 2 canvas bags and a key. She stood at my door and used the key without hesitation, the way you use a key when you've done it before, or when you never expected to have to explain it to anyone. Day 2, she came back with someone, a friend. I didn't recognize her, and they carried in a flat box that turned out to be, I assume, one of the prints now leaning against my living room wall. Day 3, more bags. She was there for almost 4 hours. Day 4, shorter visit. She left with my entryway rug. I watched all of it in about 20 minutes. Then I saved it, backed it up to 2 places, and called a lawyer. The lawyer I called was not a friend. She was someone a colleague had recommended when I was setting up my business entity 2 years ago, and I had her card in a folder I kept meaning to organize. She was brisk and practical, and she didn't editorialize. I explained the situation. She asked a few questions. She told me what my options were. What I had, she explained, was documentation of unauthorized entry on at least 4 separate occasions. What my sister-in-law had sent me was a text message that could reasonably be read as an admission. She had described what she'd done when she'd done it and expressed intent to continue. The request for reimbursement was, legally speaking, an interesting problem for her, not for me. "Do you want to pursue this formally?" the lawyer asked. I thought about it. "Not yet," I said, "but I want a letter." The letter arrived at my brother's house. I gave the lawyer their address on a Thursday. I know it was Thursday because my brother called me at 6:47 that evening, and I could hear his wife in the background. "What is this?" he said. "A formal documentation of what happened, and a request that no further contact be made regarding my property." "You hired a lawyer?" "I did." "Over a rug." I didn't say anything to that. She spent her own time. She entered my home without my knowledge or consent, I said. On 4 separate occasions. I have footage. The background noise shifted. I heard her voice, sharp, and then quieter, and then he came back. You recorded her? I have a security camera. It records automatically. That's what security camera, it records automatically. That's what security cameras do. There was a pause. A longer one this time. When he came back, some of the confidence was gone. She didn't mean any harm. I understand that's your perspective, I said, but intent doesn't change what happened. She came into my home 4 times without permission. She removed my belongings and replaced them with things I didn't choose. She asked me to pay her for it. I'm not interested in discussing whether she meant well. I'm interested in this not happening again. He asked if I was going to take her to court. I haven't decided, I said, which was true. The family is going to have a lot of feelings about this. It was such an odd thing to say. The family is going to have feelings. As though that were a natural consequence I should have been managing for. As though my own feelings, about my own home, were subordinate to the collective emotional response of people who weren't there and hadn't been asked. They're welcome to their feelings, I said. I hope they're comfortable. The calls came in over the following week. My mother first, then an aunt, then a cousin who had opinions and no information. Each one had a version of the same message. She meant well. You know how she is. Can't you just let this go? Does it have to be this serious? I had the same conversation 6 times. I was patient each time. I explained, clearly and without heat, what had happened. She had entered my home without permission, multiple times, and made unauthorized changes to my property and asked me to pay for them. Each time, the response was some variation of but. She's family, or you're being dramatic, or this is going to cause so much trouble. I noticed something during those calls. No one asked how I felt about coming home to a house I didn't recognize. No one asked what it was like to stand in my own entryway and smell someone else's idea of clean. No one asked if I was okay. What they wanted was for me to make it easier for everyone else to be comfortable. That's what let it go meant. It didn't mean this should not have happened to you. It meant your anger is inconvenient and we would like you to put it away. I didn't put it away. My sister-in-law texted again about 10 days after the lawyer's letter. This one was different in tone, shorter, less curated. She said she felt like this had gotten out of hand and she'd like to talk in person. She said she was sorry if I felt like she'd overstepped. If I felt. I didn't respond for 3 days. I wasn't ignoring her. I was thinking. When I did respond, I kept it to 2 sentences. I'm open to a conversation. But I want you to understand that a conversation is not the same as an apology, and an apology is not the same as accountability. She didn't respond to that for 2 days. When she did, she said, "What does accountability look like to you?" That was the first genuine question she'd asked me since any of this started. Not a defense. Not an explanation. An actual question about what I needed. I wrote back, reimbursement for the items that were removed or damaged. A written acknowledgement that you entered my home without permission. And we don't do this again. She said she needed to talk to my brother. I said, take your time. They came to my house 3 weeks after I got back from Denver. My brother and his wife together, which I hadn't expected. She had a folder with her. He looked like he hadn't slept well. We sat at my kitchen table, my furniture, arranged the way I had arranged it because I had spent an entire evening putting things back where I wanted them. She put the folder on the table. Inside was a handwritten letter and a check. The letter was 2 paragraphs. It said plainly that she had entered my home without permission and that she understood this was wrong regardless of her intentions. It said she would not do it again. It was signed with her full name. The check was for the items she had taken. The rug, 2 frames I couldn't find, a small wooden bowl that had been a gift. I looked at both for a moment. My brother said, "I want you to know this wasn't easy for her." I looked at him. It wasn't easy for me to come home to a house that wasn't mine anymore. He didn't say anything to that, but he nodded, just once. It was the closest thing to acknowledgement I was going to get from him, and I decided it was enough. I took the check. I kept the letter. She texted me once more about a month later, not about any of this, just a photo of something she'd seen at a market, a piece of pottery that she said had reminded her of something I'd once mentioned liking. It was a small gesture. Tentative. I didn't read anything into it, but I texted back a short response. Not warmth exactly, just acknowledgment. There are people in your life who will see a door left slightly open and treat it as an invitation to renovate. The work of having those people in your life is not hating them for it. It's being precise about what your doors actually mean and making sure the locks are changed before anyone can mistake your patience for permission. My house smells like me again. I rearranged the furniture the way I had it. I rehung the gallery wall. The fake flowers are gone. I kept one thing she left behind, a small ceramic dish, pale green, that happened to be exactly right for the spot by the door where I dropped my keys. I didn't tell anyone I kept it. Some things don't need a story attached to them. They just need to belong to you on your own terms.